Let's see. Whoop. All right. Hello. This is going to be a nice, intimate setting today. So, we are presenting Dr. Shelly Chabon, who is the Vice Provost for Academic Personnel and Dean of Interdisciplinary General Education at Portland State University. Dr. Chabon has worked in a university setting for over 40 years and formerly served as PSU's Associate Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences, as well as Chair and Professor in the Department of Speech and Hearing Sciences. In 2014, Dr. Chabon transitioned to the Office of Academic Affairs to provide leadership for collective bargaining negotiations and contract management with 3 academic unions and oversee recruitment, development, and retention of academic personnel. As of 2017, also took the role of Dean of Interdisciplinary Education, overseeing university studies and the Honors College. Dr. Chabon is a fellow of the American Speech Language Hearing Association and was the 2012 ASHA president, where she received the Certificate of Recognition from the ASHA for Special Contributions in Higher Education and Honors in the Association in 2021. Dr. Chabon has written and co-authored a number of articles, chapters, books, and language intervention and training programs. Without further ado, I present Dr. Shelly Chabon.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks for those who are here today. This is very kind. I know this is a busy time of year for everyone, and I appreciate your being here. I didn't know how many folks would come, and though I have a slideshow, I think because it is, as Tony said, a somewhat intimate gathering, you can feel free to stop me at any point, and I'd be happy to address questions. I would also say that I don't expect that the slides will take more than about 20 minutes because I really did want to get to know you as a professor in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. So though I don't get to teach as much, I am, this makes it even more special for me to be here with you today. So it is great to see you. And I would say that when I received the announcement that these series were called Food for Thought, I was reminded of something that I wrote as an introductory article when I first became president of the American Speech and Hearing Association. And I titled that publication, Can't Cook But Loves to Serve. And Tony, if we go to the first slide. And I think Can't Cook But Loves to Serve perhaps tells you more about me than I should, but it is true. I don't do much cooking. And in fact, when my husband and I were looking for our first home, he told the real estate agent that the kitchen doesn't have to be functional. It just needs to look good. So, and I have continued in that vein throughout my professional career. And I would say that I am, as I think about that, I think about how service and volunteering has really supported me along the way as a leader. So next slide. Thanks, Tony. So I'm going to carry this food theme throughout, and I hope it doesn't seem too much like dad jokes, but if it does, bear with me. Anyhow, I would say that as I don't know where you are in your careers. I've heard a little bit about Tony and Bhavani prior to others joining us today. But when we're thinking about our futures, I think it's fair to say that things rarely work out exactly as we planned. And if the last 2 years haven't taught us anything, it is that the future is uncertain. And so it's a question of how we harness that uncertainty. Just sharing a little bit about my own background, aside from the fact that I don't cook. I was a first generation college student, like perhaps some of you on the screen. I attended a public university, very much like Portland State. I had received scholarships to go other places, but couldn't afford the additional monies that were required. So, and I would say that I have benefited so much from a public university that part of the work that I do, and especially my volunteer work, is my way of trying to give back. So I never imagined when I started my career that I would go to grad school, get a master's degree, get a doctorate, get a postdoc, let alone continue on in higher ed admin and become a vice provost. So this is all part of the journey, and I would say part of harnessing the uncertainty. Next slide. When asked to share with you a little bit about my volunteering work and how this led to some of my leadership work, for me, volunteering is very much about giving back, and it is also about doing good and doing good better. And I'll share a Mexican proverb that translates to do good and don't worry to whom. And I would say that that is very much the philosophy that I take to my volunteer work. So for me, volunteering and giving is an act of justice. And I would say that it is a special reward from the recipient to the giver, not vice versa. So this is about what you get as the volunteer. And it is that spirit of service that I very much want to share with you today. Next slide. Somehow I managed to mute myself. Can you hear me again?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I just want to highlight some of the ways in which volunteering has helped my career. It can be a form of professional development. You'll hear about some of the volunteer work that I've done later in this hour, but I don't think there has been any volunteer work that hasn't been a learning experience for me. And it's one that I have been able to apply in all aspects of my life, both personal and professional. Volunteering has also expanded my network. Again, being in Portland and being able, through some of my volunteer work, to meet people across the country and across the world. When I served as ASHA president, I represented ASHA on both a national and international level and got to travel across the country and across the world, representing the association and all its members, which right now total over 100,000 people. So it also gives you a chance to see different leaders at work and to note the different styles of leadership and to learn from those that you admire and those that you question. So all of this was so important to me to see that kind of leadership in action. And through that, and through meeting all of the giants in the profession and seeing the work that they've done, to develop a sense of humility and to bring that humility to your work as a leader, to understand the importance of building a team as a leader, to appreciate what it takes to create consensus, and to develop a decision-making process. And again, though some of this will be highlighted later, I would say it is those very skills of listening, humility, and creating a consensus that I now bring to my work as vice provost when I sit around a bargaining table with our faculty and negotiate contracts that support their interests and also the interests of the university. Other ways in which volunteering has impacted me as a leader gives you a sense to appreciate what I refer to here as a macro perspective. And so much, whether you're in an individual department or in an office, you're very much focused on what the interests and the needs of that unit are. But through volunteer work, I also learned the importance of thinking about this, not just at the micro level, but also at the macro level. So what's important for the agency, for the community, and for the community beyond the one in which we engage. Volunteering has helped me in more ways than I can describe in terms of advancing my own career. A lot of that and a lot of opportunities came forward through the kind of networking that we talked about earlier. And I would say that volunteering very much, though it pushed me outside of my comfort zone, it also gave me the confidence to move forward, both in my job and in my personal life. And even as I think about getting the call to ask if I would run for ASHA president, which again was something I never could have imagined. And then to have been elected by my peers was quite extraordinary. So why don't we move to the next slide? And I would say volunteering is can also be looked at as strategic volunteering, because we'll talk about some of the challenges of volunteering. But if you are strategic in what you choose to do, it will benefit both you and your employer. It can expand and refine your leadership skills, as we talked about just a minute ago, and build a lifelong professional network. So volunteering very much empowers you to drive change in your work setting, because you begin to hear how other things are done elsewhere. And this can influence policies and processes within your own setting and as students within your own department. Next slide. All right, and sometimes service, like paid work, can get messy. I can give you some examples from experiences that I've had. Volunteering takes a lot of time, and a time commitment this can feel like hidden labor for some of us. I know as students, you're in a situation where you may be thinking about how you're going to pay for meals or rent or other issues, and whether to take on volunteer or unpaid work may not be something you could do at this point. And that's understandable. And it doesn't need to be now. But if there is time that you have available, it is something certainly to consider. You can also find yourself associated with a company that may be in trouble, and there can be concern about that harming your reputation. I will share that when I was ASHA president-elect, ASHA was facing a lawsuit. ASHA is not a troubled company. ASHA is a very well-oiled machine, but being president-elect at a point when ASHA was facing that challenge was something that I had to work through and learn about pretty quickly. And I will say that the resolution was extraordinarily positive. And I think it is in part because of the way that got resolved that that I was more interested in doing the work that I'm currently doing. You may find yourself volunteering for a group that is just not a good fit for your experience and or capabilities, and that's okay. And so you move on and find other places to be. You may find that the particular group you're volunteering for may not represent a strong developmental opportunity for you. And it's okay, and it's important to recognize that. And again, spend your time elsewhere. You may find, and I will share that I was stunned to volunteer in places that were where the members were almost exclusively women, and yet the leaders were almost exclusively men. And how to address that and work within it as a woman has taught me a lot. And hope we can come back to all of this later. Next slide. This is just some of that dad humor I promised you. Next slide. So I want to share some of the volunteer experience that I've had, and I would love to hear some of what all of you have been engaged in as well. And I've just divided this into some community work, professional work, and employment work. And I use the term work, but I mean volunteer work here. Some of my community work, when I was a grad student, I provided respite care for a child on the autism spectrum. I actually had him come home with me on weekends. He was not a child who I was working with. I did this in the clinic. I did this to support his mom, who was a single mom, and I just, it was not for therapy purposes. But I would say that the experience of doing that probably impacted me even more than it did him. And I learned so much from him and from his mom as I provided that time for her to work and have some alone time. Also, as a grad student, I became involved in some political campaigning. And it is interesting because through that, I was able to connect with funders or potential funders who later supported our graduate program. Over the years, I've served as a reading tutor. And it was through that work that I became more interested in how written and verbal language are interconnected. And I have done some other works, but I'll highlight those to just show you how some of even this early volunteering led to some of my own research and some of my own development. On the professional screen, there is volunteering at a state or local level. So that might be through OSHA, or I was living in Pennsylvania at the time and was treasurer and president of our state and local association. And the American Speech and Hearing Association has afforded me opportunities for volunteer work in so many ways. I started as a legislative counselor, became a peer reviewer, a mentor, was a member of the Council for Clinical Certification, the Council for Academic Accreditation, the Committee on Honors. I was member and chair of the Board of Ethics. And it was through some of my work on the Board of Ethics that my writing in ethical decision-making really took off. And I authored a book for ASHA on ethical education, and have had a number of opportunities since that time. And as Tony shared earlier, I don't know if all of you were there. Most recently, I was president of ASHA, a member of the ASHA Foundation, and have also served on SIGs, or special interest groups, which you might consider joining as you move forward as well. Many of you are here because of your work in NISLA, and that is marvelous. And NISLA provides you with a number of opportunities, and I'll highlight some of those soon. And also want to mention that I've done volunteer work for CAPSID, which is the Council of Academic Programs in Communication Sciences and Disorders. And CAPSID is holding their national meeting in Portland. I think it's April 19th through about the 21st or 22nd. And I hope to see many of you there in person. My employment volunteer work is perhaps too numerous to mention here, and we can just talk about that after we finish the slides. But I have done and continue to do much in the way of volunteer work, some of where I continue to get most of my enjoyment is through my work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've probably been on diversity, equity, and inclusion committees throughout my career. So next slide. I hate to be doing all the talking, so I'm trying to get through these so we can talk later. ASHA, as I said, provides you with a number of leadership and volunteer activities, and the leadership activities are really for folks at any level. So I have participated in the Leadership Cultivation Committee, and in fact, that committee was formed when I was ASHA president, and that is really for entry and emerging level members. And you can see some of the other activities that ASHA provides. Next slide. And the next slide. This is still looking at some of the ASHA opportunities available for volunteers. Next slide. So how do you become a volunteer for ASHA? The best route is through NISLA. And I'm kind of assuming that most of you are NISLA members or leaders at this point. So that's exactly where you want to be. There are a number of student leadership opportunities, both big and small, perhaps even contributing through the NISLA blog, becoming a member of IDEA, or Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Action Work Group, submitting a proposal to the ASHA convention as a NISLA member. NISLA members are not eligible to serve on ASHA committees as ASHA members, but NISLA Executive Council members can serve on virtually every committee I mentioned I had been a member of. So all of this is available to you if you have the time and interest. So last slide, and then we can talk. So, to go back to where we started, I'd say it's true that things didn't work out as I thought they would, but I believe that things actually worked out better for me. And I hope those I served through my volunteering. So thanks for listening and for looking at the slides with me. And now why don't we just talk?
Well, that was excellent. Thank you so much
Sure.
for presenting that, and I especially liked the dad jokes in between, food-related dad jokes. It's great. Really made me happy. Um, but yeah, I guess while people are coming up with some questions of their own, I was curious about the employment section that you had for like volunteer work through employment, and how that differs from, say, like paid work that you do. Yeah, what is the distinction between those two?
So volunteer work through employment, for example, I was the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of a nonprofit organization for preschoolers, and with special challenges. And as part of that work, um, I served on other community boards, and part of that was to help to support those boards, but also to share with those board members some of the work that we were doing within our own program. I also spent many weekends at my favorite one was our duck derby, and where we dumped about 2,000 ducks into the river, and this was all done to raise money for the association. I mean, for the preschool. So those are some examples. At Portland State, there are a number of committees. Service is part of a faculty member's responsibilities. So we look at teaching, research, service, and community engagement. But the level of community engagement and service really does vary from one of us to the other. And I have, because I feel so strongly about giving back, have done my part, I hope, and will continue to do so. Thanks for asking that, Tony.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. That really helps.
Mhm.
I was curious, and you might have touched on this before, but do you have like a favorite position that you were a part of? Like something that you especially loved, or are they all just like different things that you loved being a part of?
You know, that was a question that I was asked in the article that I referenced about with the same title, Can't Cook But Loves to Serve. And I think what I said then still holds true. I tend to love the one the most that I'm involved in at the moment. So in that way, I feel very fortunate because my career has been varied. I started doing clinical work, and then of course moved into teaching and research. And now I am doing 100% administration. But I'm never bored, and I'm always grateful for the people I meet. People have told me that my greatest job security right now is that nobody would want my job, and I don't necessarily share this secret with everybody, but I have a great job. I think my work with the unions is such an important position, and I feel so honored to have it. Because we bring bring the interests of the faculty to the table and try and address those, perhaps from literally different sides of the table, but I think are with many shared interests. And in fact, my most recent publication was on something that's called interest-based bargaining. So this is a far cry from speech and hearing, I understand. And it highlighted or spotlighted the work that we have done at Portland State in the last few years.
That's quite interesting. I like hearing how you have like, it's not just speech and hearing focus, you have like a very diverse experience with volunteering. And I feel like right now as a student, I am more focusing all of my experiences on like speech and hearing. But I think now that, you know, I'm getting ready to like get to that next part of my life, I definitely want to branch out and see what happens after I enter the workforce. But yeah, I thank you for answering.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that. And I will say, it's the skills that I've learned as a speech pathologist that I feel support my work now. Perhaps most profoundly, being a listener. And now, one skill that I've had to learn to control or regulate is the skill of being a problem solver. Because that is something that may have served me well, and at the same time, that's something, that tendency, I've had to learn to sit on that tendency a bit more, and listen first to what the interests are, and then focus more on all of the different options for solving the problem, rather than just moving to my own idea about solving a problem. So that's been one of the things that has really been an important lesson for me now.
I think it's interesting you bring that up because I feel like problem solving is like a huge, we have a huge emphasis in speech pathology about that, but I also feel like the field is shifting from problem solving. Like it's not so much problem solving, but like there is a big part that's still problem solving, but I think also not seeing things as like problems as opposed, like I feel like that is definitely a shift that I've been noticing.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And the whole issue about whether these are things that should be fixed or corrected, right? Especially when you're thinking about something like communication.
Yeah, that kind of brings to mind like not pathologizing everything,
Yes.
but also not coming in with like a savior mentality, and really just the shift in language from saying like patient versus like what did Dr. Khan say? Like a collaborator. So somebody that is like on an equal footing working with you towards a goal that they have set. So it's really interesting to see how that's evolved. But I had a question about your early volunteer work. You know, like when did volunteering become something that you were interested in? Like how did that develop? Yeah.
Thanks for that question. And Tony, building on what you were sharing, I sometimes use the word co-pilot,
Mm, yeah.
because that's very much how I feel. And if you can't take the plane off the ground by yourself, then you should stay put. You need a co-pilot. If the person doesn't want to be there or the family is not interested, has always been a part of my life. As a child, we were taught about giving back. We used to have, I still very much remember it, a metal can in our foyer. And when we had change in our pockets, we would put it in that. It was kind of like a bank, but it was a metal can. And then as kids, we would then, when we filled it, could bring it to those who might not have had what we had. And we were, I don't come from a family that had a lot. My mom was not born in this country, and none of my grandparents were born here. But this was instilled in me from a very early age, and I am very grateful for that.
I definitely recognize that that early age, but also that the family like environment really promotes that because my family also we didn't have a lot growing up, but like to connect it back with food, it just we never had to worry about like feeding each other and like um you know the community or the neighborhood, and that's always stuck with me. So as I moved out of the home and found that I had this urge to feed people and like would make food to kind of take out into the community because it was just me. So I had extra, and then that built on like finding collectives that did this in an organized way, and it just kind of like a ladder rung, just climbing up this ladder and like building community that way. But it really did also just start in the home. Yeah.
Yeah, I see there are two questions in the chat. One, how did you use your diversity of volunteer work to help your resume? Um, and what language did you use? I'm not sure about that second question. Oh, I bet it is how I described it on my resume. If it's not, though, let me know. But okay, how did I use? I would say most of the time when you're developing a resume, you also have a cover letter. And though I might list some of my volunteer work on my resume, so I list all of the positions I had with ASHA, for example. And I would say that I expect that that made me a more attractive candidate when I applied for positions because of the recognition of ASHA, for example, or the state associations or CAPSID. These are all organizations that are familiar to those who are hiring managers or in the processes. And then I used my cover letter to talk about the skills that I acquired through those volunteer experiences. So whether it's learning how to run a meeting, learning how to develop a budget. If you think about the work of a department chair, for example, if I was applying for a position as department chair, and I've been department chair in 3 universities and was actually the founding department chair of a department of speech and hearing. But all of these types of skills supported that work. When I was selected to be an associate dean here at Portland State, I could talk about how my national volunteering would support my ability to lead and communicate a diverse group of people. So pulling from that and giving very real life experiences, I think served me well. And what things did you find challenging as ASHA president? Again, I think that I shared a little bit about the lawsuit that ASHA was involved in when I became president. And actually, that was being brought by a sister association. It was a group in audiology. And I'm delighted to say that we were able to resolve that without attorneys and with the ability to just sit down and work through some of those issues. But you may know a little bit about the history of ASHA, and you may know that we had a moment in that history where audiologists, or many audiologists, were formed their own associations. And so that is a history that has had some bumps and may continue to have some bumps, but that is a challenge. And I think it's also, the executive board is made up of volunteers. And then ASHA also has paid staff that are to execute some of the work of the volunteers. But the volunteers are only there for a very brief period of time. So we depend on the staff to be able to provide us with a clear understanding of how the organization works. And one suggestion I had before I left as past president is that ASHA consider extending the period of time as president and eliminating the role of past president, so that you would be president-elect for a year and president for 2 years. And the reason I proposed that, and that has still not happened, is because it is a very steep learning curve. And I will say, in terms of challenges, living in Portland, and I think I'm the only person from the state of Oregon who has served as ASHA president. But that meant that I was traveling across country at least twice a year. I mean, a month, sometimes 5 times a month, but on average 2 to 3 times a month. And that's back and forth to Washington, D.C. You have an office at ASHA in addition to your office at your employment site. So that is a lot of away time from your family and from your work, from your actual paid job. And so it was a challenge. Was it worth it? Absolutely. I would say it was just an incredible experience, but it was a challenge.
Thank you for sharing.
Sure. Thank you for being here. And thank you for inviting me to do this. I was very excited.
We greatly appreciate your time. It's very special to hear about this topic. I don't think that it's spoken about enough. You know, volunteering and giving back. It's there in like theory, but really just to see the connection and to draw that connection and to talk about it is really great. We appreciate that.
Well, my pleasure. And in terms of the question that was asked again about resumes, you know, so often it is the volunteer work that helps you to stand out from others, because you're all wonderful. You're all in grad school, taking similar courses, running through similar experiences. So I would say sometimes what would set you apart would be some of this volunteer work. And that communicates to those who are reviewing your resume, whether it's for grad school or for a job, a little bit more about who you really are as a person. So I would encourage it. Let me also share that I'm on campus. I'm not in Newberger, or I guess now, well, it's a different name, right? But since I left, but I am I'm not very many steps from where you are, and it would be great to get to meet each of you in person if the opportunity makes itself available to you. I know you're quite busy, so.
Well, we greatly appreciate all of your expertise and your knowledge, and your passion that you're sharing with us. I want to open it up to any more questions, but if not, then we'll close it out. This has been very intimate and lovely. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And hope you get to go out and enjoy the sunshine.
Yes, even if it's
Thank
to walk to my next class.
you.
Correct. All right. Well, take care, everyone.
Okay, take care.
Bye.